Hi there. My name is Tony. Some background on me. I was the founding CEO of a company called Chartbeat. Sorry. I'm on the board of the Lenfest Institute, which gives out money to lots of people, so ask us for money. And I'm the CEO now of Scroll, which is where people let me do whatever I think up, basically, which is great. So I want to spend a bit of time thinking about some of the challenges I see in the membership and subscription world, some of my more hypotheses around this, and kind of what's happening in practice as we go. And it's quite hard to say memberships and subscriptions the whole time when you want to just talk about direct consumer revenue from the top 2% or so. It's quite tempting to say subscriptions or memscriptions, but I'm in Texas, and you guys might be armed. So I'm going to avoid that. I do want to point out that there's a tremendous amount of heat around memberships and subscriptions, especially over the last year or so. And we've got to be clear about why that is. This isn't because of technology or innovation suddenly coming in through. This is because these guys, in fact, the platforms are out-competing us on our traditional business model in advertising. Yeah? So this is not something which is a nice side hustle. For many people, this is the hustle. This is not something of opportunity. This is something of necessity. And so when I think about these kind of problems, I'm trying to think about them in the context of what will actually help our industry to survive. And when I think about that, there are kind of three challenges that I see around memberships and subscriptions in general. The first one being around how we think about addressable market on this side of things. This is a standard audience. This is the New York Times after 8 years. They've got about 2.5% of their audience are now digital subscribers, okay, which is actually pretty good. And they're the edgiest of edge cases in many ways as you look at this. But when you're thinking, often when I'm talking to people and they go, yeah, we've got so many people, if we could just convert like 20% of them into members, then we'll be doing great. And you're like, really your addressable market is somewhere in the low single digits. I mean, to give you a context of this, if you look at the Seattle Times, they're at about 0.6%, and they're doing well. You know, they're an innovative group. They're pushing out new things. They're at 0.6% of audience digital subscribers. So this is the world that we're in right now, and it gets a little bit more worrying when we think about what happens and how zero-sum this world can be, because what we don't know is what happens when every single publisher tries to do the same play at the same time, which is kind of what's happening right now. There's in every single, especially in New York, in every single publisher, there is a whiteboard up in there somewhere which says, how do we make money from consumers? Some of them have some interesting things on them. So what do we think about when these things are zero-sum? We heard from Millie earlier that they have more readers in California than they do in New York. Yeah? Like, what does that mean for the LA Times? What does that mean for the San Francisco Chronicle? What does it mean for Cal Matters? Folks at Google, when I was speaking to them, reckon that the average number of subscriptions that a subscriber will have will be around 1.01. That's going to be a brutal fight. And what I'm really worried about with regards to that is the kind of third part of this, which is the homogeneity of the audience that we start to serve. We know that every business model has concurrent impacts upon the things. One of the things that happened with advertising is we had the rise of clickbait, we had the rise of slideshows, and all kinds of other stuff that happened as a result of what the economic incentives told us to do. Now, one of the things that we start to see with subscription audiences is they tend to be older, richer, whiter, suburban. I mean, if I were like, Jason, you were just up on stage, so I'm going to pick on you. If I were to estimate that the Boston Globe's audience were in their 60s and 70s, worth at least $1 million as an average, how far off would I be? You're getting pretty close. Okay. I'm going to take that as a yes. And so the thing that I worry about is what happens when all of a sudden we're in this vicious zero-sum competition for this kind of core business model, and our audience that we have to try and look for looks like this, okay? Like, when we have to serve this guy and keep him happy, what does that mean? And yes, it's funny, and the worst thing about this is, by the way, in about 10 years, with everything going, I'm going to look like this. So that's a bigger issue. But what does it mean for the communities that don't get heard, that don't become part of our subscriber focus on this? It's a real challenge for how we think about news and what we want to do and how our economic models are going to drive us forward. And so for me, the question that I've been obsessing about over the last 2 years is how do we make money from the 98% if advertising isn't going to do it enough? How do we make those people matter when the business people are in the room as we go? And there's kind of 3 challenges that we see with that. First one is these people do not have enough of a relationship to give you money independently. So it has to be a network play. Have to bring publishers together in some way to offer value, and the economics have to beat the opportunity cost of revenue. You've got to be the best game in town, otherwise you won't be able to get a network together. Secondly, you've got to avoid cannibalization. You've got to be thinking about value props that are separate between your small, high-value audience and your very large, low-value audience as you go. And 3, you've got to be thinking about communities that aren't served right now from your current subscription flows, or are unlikely to come into that. So, as I started to try and think about that problem, the thing that became clear to me was that we had to start with the user's problems, not ours. We talk a lot about how journalism's business model is broken. Most people don't know that. They don't necessarily even care when you tell them that. That's not their problem, okay? So if we don't start with that, and start with something that it does feel like their problem, and their problem is that the internet itself feels broken to them. When they go to even premium news sites and they can't trust the links that they see, not taking them to dark and dodgy places because of research widgets and so forth. When they can't even navigate a story because the ads are jumping the page around so much that it becomes impossible. When their data gets thrown around and sold around to everyone. These are the problems that they feel about. And it's not based on one site, it's based on their general experience of what happens when they interact with news. So how do you get this internet that feels done to you and make it feel like it's built for you? So, how do we solve these 3 particular problems? If we go into the math, it becomes interesting. First up, you take all of that stuff, every ad, every bit of tracking technology, every dodgy research widget. For the top 80 media companies, that's about $7 billion in digital ad revenue. Okay, and they make that from 234 million people. What that means is that the cost per user is $2.50. That's how much value the industry gets out of all of that stuff, okay? Which is this. It's a fresh black coffee venti from Starbucks, okay? Every time you see a pre-roll ad on a video, every time you see shitty links at the bottom of a great article, that's what it costs you, okay? So the network economics are actually remarkably cheap to be able to beat. On the second side of things, you can avoid cannibalization by picking 2 orthogonal paths. At the network level, we care about UX and privacy. We don't even know which site we're on, but we know the experience we want when we get there. For the superfans, that 2%, they care about access and affinity. So we can keep these things separate. Now, some people, as they're thinking out through their own membership thing, have been saying, you know what, we need to throw everything in there. We'll have great experience be the prize that we give people when they become a subscriber. It's not the prize. It is the pathway to creating new subscribers and members. And if you do not believe me, try taking someone on 5 shitty dates and then asking them to marry you. It does not work. Finally, how do we think about the lower income communities who aren't the people that we're targeting right now with our subscriptions? We're still asking them for money in this context, right? But this is one of the interesting things, in that these people are already paying. Lower income communities are far more likely to be on pay-as-you-go phones rather than unlimited phones. And here's a typical one, Xfinity Mobile, $12 per gig. Here's where that becomes interesting. The average ad load and data tracker load on a page at the on-load event, so not with everything, just with the first thing, is about 3.3 megabytes. So from that, we can actually work out how many page views do you have to click on in order for you to be saving more money than it costs in your phone bill for this to happen. The answer is 3 a day. That's it. If you click on 3 stories a day on your phone, It's literally cheaper for you to do this than anything else. So those are the things that make me interested in how we get to a 98%. And to tell you how that is going from theory to practice, it has been a slow, hard process. But now we have a whole coalition of publishers, of platforms who've come together to try and see if we can try and build an internet that feels built for us, not done to us. This Tuesday, Mozilla is actually going to be starting to open it up to some of their users as they go. We're taking this very, very slowly, but we're trying to see if we can create that kind of web. A web where journalists can eat, but where users can get something that is trusted, that feels private, that feels like it was built for them. Because that is a web worth fighting for. Thank you very much.